Hey guys, I am going to go over the midterm exam study guide with you in case you missed our Zoom class when I went over it. And even if you saw that and you just need to watch it again, then it'll be available to you. So this is what the exam study guide looks like, and you access it through Canvas by going to the modules page, and it's right at the top. You'll see an exam review module, and you'll click here. This will give you the Google Doc, and then eventually when this video is done, you'll see the link to the video will be here as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the answers, but I'm going to kind of flip-flop a little bit between the answer key here and a PowerPoint I made, which is going to have some pictures that will help with this exam review. Now, this is taken directly from the notes, which are still accessible through the module section. So you'll see that all the notes are grouped together in there for you to access them if you need to. All right, so this study guide is grouped based on our units, starting with Unit 1 in scientific investigation, moving to biochemistry, tissues, the skin, bones, muscles, and then nervous system, which was our last one. So it's kind of in order with how we went in the classroom. All right, and the beauty of this is that you can pause it or fast forward it however you need so you can get the answers. Okay, so number 1 says, what is the purpose of a control group in an experiment? And you can see the answer there says as a standard of comparison. And then number 2, I'm going to hit these two together because I want to take you to the PowerPoint. The second one is not really, there's no answer to it on the study guide because it's just telling you that you're going to be given a data table and that you really just have to look at the data table and be able to answer questions about it. Okay, so let me show you. So here we have control group. This is just a funny little cartoon I put in here, but your answer for this would be, why do you need a control group, or what are they used for? It's used to have something to compare the experimental group results to see if there's a difference. Now this is a little more detailed than I had on the answer key, but this is just in case you don't understand what a control group is. So remember, you have an experimental group, which is the items that you are actually altering somehow, usually the independent variables being applied to that group of items, and then you collect your data. And then you have a control group, which is usually left alone. You don't apply the independent variable to it, or it's what we consider normal. So you'll have that data too, and then you just compare the two to see if there's a difference. All right, and then the other question says be able to answer questions when given a graph or data table. In this case, there's a couple questions, and I believe they're both data tables, similar to this one, not exactly, but like for this one, you've got several trials, you've got different scenarios where the person was taking their blood pressure. This is very much like when we did our push-up lab. We had to do the number of push-ups and compare it to the national average. And there's also a data table, I believe, on heart rates. So it should be fairly easy. You just have to be able to look at the graph of the data table and get the answers. So, all right, let's go back to our Word document. All right, number 3, I want you to define metabolism. And if you remember, that is a sum of all the chemical reactions and processes that happen in the body. So all of them. Okay, everything. We've been talking about homeostasis quite a bit. That is a topic that keeps popping up from chapter to chapter, but just in general for number 4, discuss homeostasis and negative feedback. Remember that it's going to maintain the normal values in your body. It's going to do that by resisting change from the set point. Now, if you remember what a set point is, it actually can be a point or a range of points. So like your normal body temperature is 98.6, but let's say blood pressure for your age and your gender might be between 115 over, I don't know, 75 to 120 over 80, let's just say, so you have a range, but they're normal values. So that's what it's trying to maintain. It's going to stay around that set point or set values. And they use receptors and sensors to pick up change and to monitor in the body. And then, of course, remember the brain is a control center. And then, of course, it's going to send out what to do to fix any problems. And, of course, it's going to send the information to the effector organ that's going to actually set some things in motion that's going to help bring it back to normal or fix the problem. All right, number 5 says explain the following directional terms and planes as they relate to the human body. So if you recall, we have to remember that when we're looking at these things, the body needs to be in anatomical position, which I'll show you a picture in a second. Remember that you can be laying flat, but you kind of had to be facing forward, feet together. But the palms of your hands have to be facing forward. Okay, so you have superior, inferior, dorsal, ventral, and the transverse plane. These are the ones that are on the exam that you'll need to know. And with superior, inferior, it's usually when you're comparing two things. So if a part is superior, it means it's above or higher than the other part you're comparing it to. And then inferior refers to something that's below. So you could be comparing parts of your legs. Your knee is superior to your ankle. Your ankle is inferior to your knee. Okay, you also have dorsal and ventral. And if you recall, dorsal is pretty much anything along your backside, but that's also called the posterior side. And the ventral side is anything along your front side or belly side, which is also called the anterior side. And then we had several different planes, which are those imaginary lines that divide the body up into sections. And the transverse plane is the one that cuts horizontally, this way, which is going to create a superior and an inferior half. So let me show you a few pictures that can help you with this. Okay, so our directional terms, remember with anatomical positions, this is kind of showing you got the palms facing forward, feet together, facing forward. Here is a picture kind of showing you anterior and ventral are the same size, and posterior and dorsal are the same size. Here's just showing you superior and inferior, just showing the head and the shoulders. For example, the head is superior to the shoulder is inferior to the head. And then here is just showing you that transverse plane, horizontal plane dividing the body into an upper or superior and a lower inferior half. Okay. Now we're on to Unit 2, which was biochemistry. Remember that included the acid and base stuff, buffers. We talked about macromolecules like carbohydrates, lipids, proteins. So there's not much on it. I had to pick and choose, but I decided I would want to pick up on this buffer because we're going to talk about it again soon in second semester. But what is the purpose of the bicarbonate buffer? And that is, remember, buffers help to resist change in pH, so it's going to help maintain normal blood pH. That's what your bicarbonate buffer does. You have these in your bloodstream, so it's going to help keep your blood normal within that set range for homeostasis. Okay, and then number 7 says, how does carbon dioxide affect your blood pH? Well, when carbon dioxide increases, it causes your pH to go down, so it's going to cause your pH to become more acidic, which is why it's important to have this bicarbonate buffer there. Number 8 says, what process uses carbohydrates, which are sugars, and oxygen to create energy for your body cells? Well, hopefully you were thinking cell respiration, but you'll see I've added the word aerobic here, which is going to make a difference towards the end. We have another question that's dealing with another type of cell respiration, but aerobic just means with oxygen. Number 9, 4 structures of the human body made with proteins. Well, muscles, enzymes, red blood cells, and antibodies. Okay, we've talked about these two. We've touched on red blood cells and antibodies. We're going to talk about those second semester, so that's coming up. Okay, moving into Unit 3 on tissues. If you recall, there was epithelial, connective, muscular, and nervous. I only have questions on epithelial and connective because first semester we actually go into the nervous system and the muscular system, so I saved some questions for those units. Okay, so number 10, how is epithelial tissue classified? If you remember, this is the one that had the biggest group. There's 3 different cell shapes, and there's 2 different ways to look at the cell layers. So on your exam, there will be a picture to help you with this question, and you're going to have a diagram similar to this one. So you'll see where it's showing you there's simple and there's stratified, which is showing you simple is a single layer of cells, stratified is multiple layers. And then you have shape, squamous, which is flat, cuboidal, which is cube shaped, and column or columnar is column shape or rectangular shape. So you'll have a picture to help you on the exam with that question. Okay. Which type of, number 11 is which type of epithelial tissue changes shape to accommodate a change in volume, such as a urinary bladder. So if you think about it, your urinary bladder can be small, you know, if it's empty, but as it fills up with urine, it's going to stretch. So originally your bladder has got cube-shaped cells, cuboidal cells, and then as it stretches, it's kind of like a rubber band, it thins out, so they become squamous. So that's called transitional epithelial when they're able to change shape like that. And then for connective tissue, if you remember, there was, it's classified as loose or dense, dense being like the hard, compact, like bone. But we talked about two types of loose connective tissue, which is blood and adipose. Adipose is just a fancy word for fat. Okay, number 13 is where we start Unit 4, which was the skin system. It asks you about functions of the skin. So there are multiple functions. You have thermoregulation, you have protection from abrasion, sensation, excretion, and acts as a barrier, which most of those are pretty self-explanatory. If you don't understand what thermoregulation, if you think thermo having to do with temperature, and regulation is to regulate something. So it's really just temperature control. And there's a picture similar to this on the exam. This one is showing like when you're cold, your blood vessels in your skin kind of constrict and it kind of keeps the blood flow more inside, so the heat is retained, where when you're outside and it's hot and the blood vessels like dilate, get bigger, and they get closer to the surface, and the heat loss is able to, you know, leave through the surface of the skin. So this is just one way that the body can regulate, the skin can regulate body temperature. All right, I believe the next question is on the skin layer, so let me show you real quick and then I'll go back. So it asks you about the 3 layers of the skin. So here is a picture, and there is a picture on the test, it just doesn't have it labeled, okay? But just remember the upper layer is the epidermis, the middle layer is the dermis, and the lower layer is called the subcutaneous layer, but it's also called the hypodermis, which is back on the study guide, so we'll take you back there in a minute. Let me show you this next picture because it also deals with the skin. The last question for the skin says, where can sebaceous glands be found and what do they secrete? Well, they can be found associated with the hair shaft. So here's your hair and there's your sebaceous gland. Sebaceous, it just means an oil gland, okay? And what does it secrete? Sebum, which is the fancy anatomical word for oil. Okay, so that's how your keeps your hair, you know, protected, lubricated. That's why if you don't wash your hair for a while, it gets oily. Okay. Let's go back to document here so y'all can get the answers. Okay, so there's your, it doesn't have the picture, but it gives you the descriptions. Epidermis is top outer layer, dermis is the middle layer, and the hypodermis, also called the subcutaneous layer, is the bottom layer, which is attached to the muscles underneath. And then where can sebaceous glands be found and what do they secrete? Hair shaft in the dermis, and they secrete sebum, which is oil. Okay, if you got to pause it, pause it. I'm going to keep going. Unit 5, skeletal system. Okay, first question, number 16 for that talks about those different ways we categorize bones based on their shape. We have the long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular. Remember, long are longer than they are wide, like the bones in your arms and your legs. Short bones are, I call them the little boxy bones or nuggets because they are pretty much as long as they are wide. And examples would be your wrist and ankle bones. Flat bones are thin and flat. Examples include ribs, scapula, cranium, so the ones that are up here, top of your head. And irregular shaped bones don't fit into any other category. An example like your face bones, jawbone, and your vertebrae. Let me show you. There is a picture. There will be. Not all of them have pictures on the tests, but there'll be a picture for that question. So this is just showing you the difference in the way they look. Long bone. You see the short bone here, and the sternum, which is attached to the ribs, but they're all flat. Okay. And then the irregularly shaped vertebrae. All right, you have some words that are going to fit into that whole physiology and maintaining the calcium levels and stuff, dealing with the bones. Osteoblast, osteoclasts, and osteocytes. Remember, osteo means bone. So an osteoblast is a cell that's going to build bone, stores the calcium, puts it into the bone tissue. Osteoclasts, on the other hand, are going to be cells that break down bone tissue, which is going to release that calcium into the bloodstream when needed. And then osteocytes are just another name for mature bone cells. All right, so if you remember, there's two hormones that's going to regulate calcium homeostasis, PTH, which is abbreviation for parathyroid hormone. It speeds up bone breakdown by increasing the osteoclast activity. And this is when your blood calcium levels get low or lower out of the normal range, and it's just going to put a little extra calcium in the bloodstream by breaking some of the bone down. And then calcitonin is the other hormone that's going to slow osteoclast activity. And this happens, it decreases the blood calcium levels by storing calcium in the bone. So when you get too much calcium in your bloodstream, those osteoblasts are going to take it and put it back into the bone. And the hormone calcitonin controls that. Okay, we talked about what happens when bones break or when they form or repair themselves. So there's some steps. There will be a picture similar, not exact, but similar to this right here. That kind of takes you through the steps. So if you remember, you get the bone break, you get the blood clot, which is the hematoma that forms, but it'll say blood clot. So the blood clots around the area of the break, and then you get some connective tissue that forms in that area, which is called the callus. It's not on here, but it's on the study guide. And then spongy bone will form first, and then eventually you'll get compact bone that fills in. Takes a little while for it to happen, but that's why you have to wear a cast for a certain amount of time. So this is like a little process flow chart kind of, but this is the main words you need to answer this. And if you have this, you should be able to answer that question with no problem. So that means the bone breaks, blood clot forms. Again, the callus is just that zone of tissue repair. So the callus of connective tissue forms first, and then you get, which is kind of like the cartilage. And then eventually that turns into spongy bone, and the spongy bone will eventually turn into compact bone. All right, moving on to muscles. Unit 6. Number 20, what is a muscle fiber? It's just another name for a muscle cell. 21 asks, what two muscle cell components are directly responsible for muscle contraction, as indicated by the sliding filament model? Remember, your muscle cells are long and thin, like fibers. That's why they call them muscle fibers. And inside those cells, you have these thin proteins called actin and myosin. Well, these things have to bond together. And when they do, that's when they slide past one another and causes the muscle to contract or shorten. So that's how you get muscle contractions. So actin and myosin are what's going to start it all. Number 22 says, what is calcium's purpose in the whole muscle contraction? Well, you got to have calcium. Like I said, actin and myosin have to bond together. And without calcium's help, they never would be able to do so, because what it does is it helps to expose the myosin bonding site so actin can bond to it. You guys will have a picture on the exam just to kind of help you out with this one. It looks similar to this. You'll see, I don't think it has all these other words, but you see where it says calcium bonding site. This is actin, and then you see calcium coming in and bonding and exposing that myosin bonding site. So hopefully that'll be something that could at least help you answer that question. All right, number 23. What caused the burning sensation felt during strenuous exercise? Okay, when you get to that point, when you've exercised a lot, you start feeling the burn, and that's because you kind of used up your ATP supply. So what your body does is it goes into a process called anaerobic respiration, which means without oxygen. And it makes some quick little ATPs for you so that you can hopefully finish up what you're doing. It won't last forever, but it does produce lactic acid. So the lactic acid buildup is going to cause the burning sensation in your muscles. Okay, last unit, unit 7. What are the 4 main regions of the brain? This is for a nervous system unit. You have the cerebrum, cerebellum, diencephalon, and the brain stem. You guys just had a quiz on that, so that should be fresh in your memory. Number 25, discuss the motor neuron. If you remember, it is also called the multipolar neuron, has multiple dendrites and 1 axon, and it is the most common type of neuron. I'm going to show you a picture, which you will have on the exam. Okay, looks similar to this. So there's your multiple dendrites, your single axon. Okay, so just to point down, and again, this is also called a multipolar neuron. And it is the most numerous found in the body. (26) Where does the CSF come from that fills the spinal cord central canal? CSF refers to cerebral spinal fluid. So it's the fluid that's made in the brain. It kind of washes over the brain. It helps with waste removal and all kinds of things. But it's kind of there. It coats the brain inside and out. And you have these ventricles, which are spaces in the brain that make it. There are 4 of them. And the 4th ventricle is the one that is kind of ties into the brain stem, which is going to connect to the spinal cord. So that little canal that's in the center of the spinal cord has the fluid in it, and it gets it from the 4th ventricle in the brain. All right, 27 and 28 deal with the eye and the ear. So the eye parts you need to know for 27. There is a picture of the eye, and I'm going to show you these 2, and then this will be the last time I flip over to this PowerPoint. But you will have a picture similar to this, just to kind of use as reference, and then a picture similar to this for the ear. Okay, so these will be on the exam, just kind of like to help you with just visual, so you can kind of see it. Maybe that would help with answering, but really you're just looking at the functions or descriptions I have here. Remember, the iris is the one that's going to change the shape of the pupil. It's the colored part around the pupil. The pupil is the actual hole in the eye. It's going to change shape to allow light into the eye. But remember, the iris is the one that changes its shape. Remember, lens focuses. That's pretty easy. And the retina is that inner layer that's going to receive the image. Okay, and then the ear. Remember your little ear flaps, or the outer parts of the ear is called the pinna, singular pinnae for plural. Tympanic membrane is just another name for the eardrum. Of course, it vibrates due to sound waves. Eustachian tube, it's going to connect the middle ear to the nasal cavity. And the cochlea is a sensory structure, so it picks up on a lot of sound vibrations and stuff. All right, so that is the end of the exam review. You guys can hopefully get all the answers you need. If you have any questions, Before the exam, please make sure you email me or ask me during class. Okay, guys, have a great day.